A lot of people reach out to me asking about imposter syndrome and how to find more confidence in their role. So I wanted to make a video and talk about it. Hi, I'm Laura, a PM working in tech, and on my channel I cover my life working as a PM, my life working in tech, and other computer science related advice. Let's jump right into what is imposter syndrome and this lack of confidence. You've probably heard of imposter syndrome, or also known as the imposter phenomenon, but roughly speaking, if you're feeling imposter syndrome, then you're also probably encountering feelings of inadequacy, feeling lost, confused, uncertain, and generally maybe stressed about your performance and keeping up with everyone else around you. You probably also feel behind and lacking knowledge, even though you're also doing pretty well comparative to everyone else, despite all of this. I am aware though that like many other things, imposter syndrome can probably manifest itself in many different ways, so do note that the symptoms I've described aren't necessarily all-encompassing of what imposter syndrome may look like for you or for the next person over. The opposite of imposter syndrome is going to be the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you know very little, but in fact you think very highly of yourself and your skills, and then it all comes crashing down once you realize there's actually more than the tip of the iceberg that you actually currently know. So how do you actually know if you have imposter syndrome, or it's just everyday normal doubt because it's your very first internship and it's the first day, or you're heading into your very first full-time job in your whole career? So it's hard to say exactly whether you have it or whether you don't. I bet though that most people are somewhere squarely in the middle. You go in and out of phases of feeling like you have imposter syndrome because, again, you're thrown into a new environment like previously described, or you're kind of on that tip of the iceberg and finding out there's so much more out there for you to still learn, and that kind of throws you back into that self-doubt cycle. You're definitely not alone in this whole thing, and know that it's entirely normal. It's not bad that you have imposter syndrome, and in fact, it's often a good thing because it means that you're in an environment where you have a lot of learning to do, but more on that in a bit. So let's also spend a little bit of time and context on why does imposter syndrome happen in the first place. There are some hypotheses out there that explore the link between imposter syndrome and general anxiety, or also feelings of perfectionism and the desire to control things in your life. Another purpose that people may be more prone to imposter syndrome if they grew up in a family or culture that really overemphasized success and achievement above everything else. In addition, if the people sent mixed messages such as criticizing you for not doing well enough, but also praising you for doing okay, then that can also contribute to imposter syndrome. I also want to tackle the misconception that women are more prone to imposter syndrome than men. There's really no basis for why this would be true, but I think a lot of the misconception comes from the fact that women in STEM often talk about feeling imposter syndrome and that they're the only ones really speaking up about feeling this way. You probably hear more people experiencing imposter syndrome from these groups regardless of what industry they're in, again because there's less representation and role models for them, and they probably feel like they have to work harder to get to the same place in which everyone else is at. For this last section, I want to talk about how to tackle imposter syndrome and how to slowly level up your confidence. The first and most important thing, I think, is to start advocating for yourself and have those difficult conversations you may be afraid of having otherwise. I think the most important and undervalued tools of how people find success is those who are willing to drive and steer their own career rather than wait for things to be handed for them. That being said though, talking about your career, talking about promotions and how to navigate that is a really complex web, and people just really aren't prepared for that. It's definitely not something that's been taught to us in school, so starting off your career, it's going to be pretty difficult and uncomfortable to have these conversations because you're just not used to it and you don't know the right way to go about and approach these things. Another important thing in leveling up your confidence is gaining the confidence to feel comfortable speaking up in group meetings, contributing, and actively participating in the conversation. You've probably experienced that panic where you're sitting on a meeting for 30 or 60 minutes, you haven't said a single thing, and someone in the meeting calls on you and says, "Hey Laura, do you have anything to add or do you have any questions? You've been a little bit quiet today." So how do you actually tackle these things like career conversations or answering and deflecting one of these questions at the end of a meeting? The best and easiest way to do this is to start extremely small. For example, for tackling your first career conversation, you can kind of bring up very general expectations such as, "Hey, what do you expect for a new grad software engineer to be accomplishing within the first 6 months?" As you get more confidence, you can start to scope this into the more specific realm and how it applies to you. Then the next conversation may focus on your current performance, and from there, talk about the opportunities for promotions and growth in your role. For the situation where you're being called out in a meeting, if you're comfortable, you can go ahead and ask a question or a statement, or if you're completely uncomfortable, you can kind of redirect the question. You can say something like, "Hey, X person, thank you so much for checking in. I don't have any current questions right now, but I'll be sure to follow up with you offline through Teams or through email if I have any further questions." The second is to know that there are plenty of other people who feel the same exact way. Just talking to someone else who is in a similar situation or understands where you're coming from can be super helpful. It alleviates some of the pressure off of you because you're able to share. It also helps you get your frustrations out there and aired so you concretely know what you need to tackle, and it can also give you a sense of what you need to do next to feel less of an imposter. And whether you vent, commiserate, or find a path forward, all of these are very valid options, and as long as it helps you feel a little bit better, then it's time well spent. This can be someone in the role of a friend, a coworker, a mentee, a mentor, a family member, whatever and whoever you feel comfortable talking to and with. You can also reach out to a therapist. There are plenty of people out there that specialize in this kind of thing that can provide you really valuable insight and outside perspective if you're willing to let them in. A third thing that's helpful to internalize is that no one got to where they are without consistent practice and dedication to what they're doing. Everyone usually sucks the first time they try something, and when you're just jumping into your career as a new grad, you're probably not going to be very good comparative to a lot of people out there that have spent years and decades honing their craft and their career. The same is probably going to be true for any hobby, skill, or interest that you're interested in trying out. Just accept that you're not going to be great the first time around and utilize that as a jumping off point instead. And sure, some people may have more of a natural propensity or talent for things, but that doesn't mean that they got to where they are just because they have talent. Without taking the time to actually practice and improve their skills, they're just going to stagnate like the rest of us, and that talent won't have gotten them anywhere further than someone who has dedicated hard work. The fourth and last thing is to make sure that you're celebrating your wins at every step of the way. Keep track of the good things that happen and celebrate the small wins even if they may not feel like much. The more that you celebrate the small things, it'll start to snowball and build up your confidence, and so eventually you can start to celebrate a big win as well over the course and accumulations of these smaller wins. Also, if you deliberately keep track of the good, it'll serve as a great reminder when it comes time for performance review because you have track of all these amazing things you've done over the course of your career so far. Again, it helps to prove that you're capable, you're doing good things, and that even if you may on the daily experience imposter syndrome, you're still capable and accomplishing things that you may not have thought that you were capable of or doing in the first place. That's a quick chat on imposter syndrome and finding a little bit more confidence in your role, especially as an intern or new grad. This is definitely a complicated subject and not a one-size-fits-all solution, and things will take time. However, I promise that you're doing a great job and that you'll find success soon enough. As always, feel free to schedule a coffee chat with me if you have any other questions at aka.ms/chat with Laura, or if you're free to join the conversation on my Discord channel, linked in the description box down below.